Twitter Files 15 from our friend Matt Taibbi drop, and they detail for us a very interesting relationship with this entity called Hamilton 68. You're going to see it's kind of like this think tank with all these very sophisticated elite who are going to guide us through the perils of misinformation and disinformation on Twitter. And in order to accomplish their goals, well, you guessed it, they're going to have to censor the whole planet. Well, let's go in directly to the Twitter Files. And as usual, they come from our friend Matt Taibbi at mtaibbi on Twitter, and I'll invite you to go follow him on Twitter and elsewhere. But he starts us off with a video, which is a little bit unusual here. And this is a video that has gotten 5 million views. And so let's cue this up and make sure we can listen in how this very interesting Twitter thread 15 starts.
You and your team, you guys created a website, Hamilton 68.
Yes, my colleagues and I, we tracked Russian accounts.
That's some bullshit.
So they're literally right now, there are Russian bots, according to your website, that are putting this out into the world. Is that correct?
It's bull.
You and your
Okay, this guy, you see, they tell us his name is Clint Watts. We'll just break this down. Clint Watts, leader of Hamilton 68. Clint Watts. Okay, we'll put a pin in that name. As the video moves forward, they tell us he's with this organization called Alliance for Securing Democracy. And they told us, a new tool to track Russian disinformation on Twitter. That was published by some blog August 2nd, 2017. Well, what's coming up? Well, we've got elections in 2020. After Trump won in 2016, all of the big tech companies went into panic mode. They said, holy moly, the internet memed this dude into the White House. We can't let that happen again. And so they started to create these little stupid think tanks called Alliance for Securing Democracy. You see here, it's made up of a bunch of people. We'll go through this in a little bit more detail, but look how much information is packed into this one video. Is that Jake Sullivan? Is that Jake Sullivan over there? I'm not even sure if that's him or not. Who is this guy? Is that John Podesta? You're kidding me. Well, what's he doing on? What are those two people doing on this organization? God, I don't know. Well, we'll see. We certainly know John Podesta's on there. Let's see who else is there. And as this video moves forward, they tell us that they tracked Russian accounts. Here is a screenshot from their dashboard, dashboard.securingdemocracy.org, GMF, the Alliance for Securing Democracy. And here they say how to read this dashboard. You know, we're very sophisticated over here. They say the charts and graphs here display hashtags and URLs promoted by Russian-linked influence networks on Twitter. Content is not necessarily produced or created by the Russian operatives, although it's sometimes the case. The network amplifies this Russian disinformation. If you want to read more about our methodology, look here. Here are the top hashtags from Russian terrorists. Syria, NYC terrorist attack, Russia, MAGA. MAGA's in there. You see how that one's in there? Manhattan. NYC strong is a terrorist phrase, and so on. Now, if you look down here at the bottom of this, top topics. What is this word right here? What is that word? Oh, it's down here at the bottom. You can't, oh, yeah, there it is. It's Trump. A top topic is Trump. Oh, you're kidding me. Times mentioned in the last 48 hours, 1,026. So very convenient. Trump is the top topic that this weird think tank is out there now censoring. That's going to be very useful the next time they have an election. Let's carry on. So here we have an email now in the second tweet. This comes in on October 3rd, 2017, 6:19 p.m. It's from our friend Yoel Roth. We're very familiar with him. He used to be the head of trust and safety over at Twitter. Elon kept him around for a little bit before he booted him too. This email came in and he is responding. The subject is regarding Hamilton 68 account list. Hamilton 68 account list. Remember that dashboard we looked at? They had a big list of the accounts that were the problematic accounts. Yoel is responding. He says, yes, exactly. He says, I don't know who he's responding to because it's been redacted, but he says, yes, exactly. It's so weird and self-selecting, he says. And they're so unwilling to be transparent and defend their selection that, quote, that I think we just need to call this out on the BS, he says the actual word, that it is. I think we just need to call this out on the BS that it is. What is BS there, Yoel? Oh, that's right. The Hamilton 68 account list. Okay, so in other words, all of those dashboard metrics were referencing a list of accounts that were engaging in Russian activity. Yoel says they are BS. All right, so let's see what happens next. Another email comes in from Yoel. This is regarding the hashtag Schumer shutdown, January 23rd, 2018. And he's copied a couple different entities here. Yoel says, hey, redacted. He says, all right. Unlike hashtag release the memo, they're talking about hashtag Schumer shutdown. He says, unlike the other one released the memo, which was from that Nunes memo, which turned out to be a big, sort of intelligence op by Shifty Schiff himself. He says, unlike that one, this one is primarily being driven by data from Hamilton 68, that think tank. He says, I'll do another sweep for spam here shortly. But he says, but as of yesterday, Yoel, he says, this looked like the right-leaning hashtag about the shutdown, which only got the label of, quote, Russian because the Hamilton dashboard falsely accuses a bunch of legitimate right-leaning accounts of being Russian bots. How we publicly push back on Hamilton is a bigger question, but I don't think there's anything too noteworthy about this hashtag beyond that. All right. So we've got a group of weirdos who think that they are tech gurus who can be Russian Twitter account bot whisperers. And they're like, oh, we're going to start our own TNT network show. And so they started their alliance and they, started to create their dashboards. Twitter says they are full of crap. 2 emails now. Yoel says they don't know what the heck they're talking about. These are legitimate right-leaning accounts. Another email comes in February now, 2018. Again, Hamilton 68 from Yoel. He says, hey, everybody. He says, we produced an extensive description of these accounts during one of our projects, and we listed them here at this URL. The findings were generally that these accounts are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots. They're just right-leaning users. That's all. Highlighted, Matt has for us. Virtually any conclusion drawn from it will take conversations in conservative circles on Twitter and accuse them of being Russian. Virtually any conclusion from it will take conversations in conservative circles and accuse them of being Russian, which is exactly what they want to do because they want to silence conservative circles. That's the point. The bot check people use a similarly flawed methodology. Yoel's giving them the 411. He says, look, in terms of substance, this is truly a nothing burger. Nothing burger. It's just a problem of journalists continuing to lean on deeply flawed tools pushed by people looking to capitalize on the bot media frenzy. They're just trying to take advantage of this situation. He says, but to try to allow us to get ahead of some of this Hamilton 68 nonsense, I'm working on our own internal version of it, and you can view it here. Please feel free to take a look. He says, interestingly, there are already some discrepancies between the hashtags that they tout on their site and the ones we're seeing in our own data. Yoel says certain hashtags like hashtag Israel and hashtag Trump appear to be completely blacklisted from the Hamilton dashboard. These and other inconsistencies, coupled with a total lack of transparency from their team, point to a major unmet opportunity to try to educate our comms and government partners about the flaws in tools like Hamilton. Nick blank blank should help advise on that, your friend Yoel. Okay, so in other words, they know that Hamilton 68 is meaningless, but they're having a difficult time communicating that because a lot of their data is inaccessible, right? It's not transparent. So Matt continues in tweet 5. He tells us, these are quotes by Twitter executives about the Hamilton 68, a digital quote dashboard that claimed to track Russian influence and was the source of hundreds, if not thousands, of mainstream print and TV news stories in the Trump years. So you create one think tank that is faking to be this neutral arbiter of the truth, and that entity can set the pretext, can lay the foundation for a bunch of the media to dip their straws into there and just suck the stories out of there. And let's see how this works for us. Here is a screenshot of the website, Alliance for Securing Democracy, About Us, Our Work, Toolbox, and in the news. And they have a picture here of old Pooty Poo releasing some red death tweets of blood and murder from his hand, just releasing them into your feeble brain, just wrecking your free thinking capability, decimating your logic and all your tech faculties. Oh man, it sucks when that happens. We can't do anything about it. We're so dumb, Wow. It's a good thing we have them tracking disinformation for us. Otherwise, we might be even dumber than we already are. Golly. He says that this quote dashboard, who ran this? Was it like a tech bro or something? Like some technical guru? Who ran this thing? Matt tells us the dashboard was headed by former FBI. Oh, great. Former FBI counterintelligence official and current MSNBC contributor. Oh, gosh. His name is Clint Watts. And funded by a neoliberal think tank called the Alliance for Securing Democracy. All right. So you know that this is just a disaster ahead of us. the Alliance for Securing Democracy. And only these people can do it. I mean, without them, democracy is going to be insecure. Look at what happened with that podium that one time. So this guy is former FBI, probably good friends with James Baker and Michael Sussman and who knows who else. But they just probably pal around, and you can see they tell us a little bit else about who is on the board. The Alliance for Securing Democracy, so-called, their advisory council includes these people. Neoconservative writer called Bill Kristol, former ambassador to Russia, Michael McFaul, ex-Hillary for America chief, John Podesta. What is a Hillary Clinton advisor doing on this? And former heads of deputy and heads of the CIA, former heads or deputy heads of the CIA, the NSA, and the Department of Homeland Security, all on this fake think tank. Michael Chertoff, you've got Tuma, you've got David Kramer, Bill Kristol, who is a rabid anti-Trumper, all right? Secretary of Homeland Security, Mike Chertoff. Let's see who else we have. Mike McFaul, Anna Palacio, and John Podesta. Very interesting fella, that guy. Interesting household over there as well. News outlets for years would use this entity as a pretext. They would say, well, they found all of this truth. And look at all these very estimable people that are on this committee and on this think tank. People like Michael Chertoff, right? DHS. People like John Podesta. He wouldn't lie to you. Bill Kristol, he hates Trump more than we do. So therefore, we can trust all of this material, and they did. News outlets for years cited Watts and Hamilton 68 when they were making their fake claims that Russian bots were, quote, amplifying an endless parade of social media causes. They said there was strikes against Syria in support of Fox News host Laura Ingraham. The campaigns of Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. They didn't like Bernie either because he was threatening the power structure. Here's what NBC News glabbed onto. They said one tiny corner of the U.S. government pushes back against Russian disinformation. Polygraph is a part of a small U.S. government effort to counter Russia propaganda machine. The Russians are taking us over, with all of their disinformation. Well, let's see. Because Hamilton apparently didn't have good tabs on them, according to Twitter. Twitter themselves said that all this disinformation was garbage. Russia-linked accounts are tweeting their support of embattled Fox News host Laura Ingraham. The Russians are supporting Laura Ingraham. Here's another one. Politico took this one. The Russian bots are coming. The bipartisan duo is on it. They're going to cross party lines to track down and stop Kremlin propaganda. They're just very happy with their stories. Securing Democracy Dispatch. Where'd this come in from? Oh my goodness, the ASD team. And this is a special edition from the Mueller indictment. Wow, a bunch of very, very, very sophisticated individuals at these think tanks are preparing for us a dispatch for securing democracy, they write. Mueller indicts Russia's internet agency, 13 Russians and 3 other entities for meddling in the 2016 election. Yeah, and what happened to those people? Mueller describes a sweeping years-long multi-million-dollar conspiracy by hundreds of Russians aimed at criticizing Hillary Clinton and supporting Senator Bernie Sanders and Trump, says Bloomberg. This supports the findings of Clint Watts, a senior fellow for the Alliance of Securing Democracy. Mueller describes that. All right, so this is all of their emails, right? February 20, 2018. They're all just really excited about themselves. Matt continues, he tells us, Hamilton 68 was also the source for stories claiming that Russian bots push terms like the deep state, or hashtags like hashtag Fire McMaster, Schumer shutdown, walk away, release the memo, Alabama Senate race, Parkland shooting, and many others. Here's another story from Fast Company. Twitter bots are thriving, and they're more lethal than ever. Political Twitter bots, many with ties to Russia, didn't go away after the election, and experts say they're getting more sophisticated. It's going to be very useful for them. When they need to censor a bunch of their political opponents, this is going to be very convenient. Russian bots are using the hashtag walkaway to try to wound the Dems in the midterms. Is that true? Did the Russian bots actually try to do that? Or were people actually just walking away? But they wanted to blame the bad news on the forever boogeyman, the Russians. David Love wrote that back in 2018. Another one. Russia pushes more deep state hashtags. Those journalists, so-called, from Politico wrote this article. And here's the final one from Mother Jones. Russian propagandists are pushing for Roy Moore to win. Kremlin-linked trolls have also joined Trump and Fox News in targeting the FBI. Okay, so in other words, any legitimate criticism about anything that they don't like, they just throw it right into the Russian propaganda bucket. And that gives them a nice excuse to twist the levers in the big tech companies to silence their political opponents. And we've used the analogy of yard signs. Okay, you have yard signs. It would be illegal to go up and steal somebody's yard sign, right? That would be a theft, right? That would be diminishing their ability to speak. It would be a problem to do that. But online, if you post a tweet, which is like a digital yard sign, and it's your digital free speech on your account, the platforms can just come and remove all of those from you, right? Literally suppress that visibility, suppress those impressions, and do that without any consequence. And they can just blame it all on the Russians. It's very convenient. Taibbi continues, he tells us, the secret ingredient to Hamilton's analytical method, how did they come up with all of these accounts? They wrote the following. They say, our analysis has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online. This is what they said. Oh, what is this tool exactly? They describe the methodology for us. Here's what they say. In Federalist Papers number 68, oh, they're bringing up the Federalist Papers. That's where it came from. How dare they? Alexander Hamilton wrote of protecting America's electoral process. So it's about the election from foreign meddling. Today, we face foreign interference of a type Hamilton couldn't even have imagined. The Hamilton 68 dashboard, a project with the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Wow, that's really official. It seeks to expose the effects of online influence networks and inform the public of themes and content being promoted to Americans through near real-time looking at Russian propaganda and disinformation efforts online. All right? Looks really official. A new tool from Hamilton 68. There's old Pootie Poo again, releasing his tweets of death. What is the dashboard monitoring? They right here in the bottom, they say, the top of the dashboard shows tweets from Russia's overt propaganda outlets in English and a short post discussing the themes of the day. But these disinformation networks also include bots and trolls, and our analysis has linked 600 Twitter accounts to Russian influence activities online. Wow, that's amazing. You've got a list of 600 Russian propaganda accounts. It'd be really good to know what those are, right? What is on the list, like who's on the list, so you can do something about that. The automated monitoring updates daily. The top themes will update in the morning, and as we saw previously, one of those most important themes was Trump, right? Trump, Trump, Trump. It's all Trump. They can't stand it. Taibbi continues, he says, now Hamilton 68 never released that so-called list, that 600, claiming the following, that the Russians will simply just shut the accounts down. All those reporters and TV personalities making claims about Russian bots, they never even knew what they were talking about. This is a clip from an article. It says, for what it's worth, Rosenberger and Fly, they disclose their methodology on their website, talking about Hamilton 68, and they say that they can't reveal the list of the 600 accounts. If they do, the Russians will just shut them down. Other researchers with whom I've spoken say the tweets and messages found by Hamilton 68 are consistent with what they've seen from Russian-linked accounts. Rosenberger, who spent years with the Obama White House and the State Department, laughs at the idea that she's a neocon plant. Why would anybody think that? Though it is true that their advisory board contains both liberals and former Obama ambassador Mike McFaul, as well as the original neocon, Bill Kristol. Yeah. Why would anybody think that? Well, because there are other neocons on there. And you were in the Obama administration, which basically was the same thing. Twitter executives were in a unique position to recreate Hamilton's list. You're kidding. Wow. Reverse engineering it from the site's requests for Twitter data, right? So they just looked at all of the inbound requests for data. Like you go to search for something, right? Or an app searches Twitter. You have an application, like it's a Twitter application or whatever, right? There's APIs. So it plugs into the API. It does a search. Twitter said, oh, where's Hamilton plugging into? Oh, it's plugging in right there. Oh, what information are they asking for? Oh, they're doing basic routine searches? Like for just like random queries? Okay, well, we can see what they're searching for. Why don't we do the same thing that they're doing and look for the same things they're looking for? Concerned about the deluge of Hamilton-based news stories, they looked into this. They looked at what Hamilton was looking at. Here's what they found. We have a couple emails come flying in. First one, Tuesday, October 3rd, 2017, 5:56 p.m. from Yoel Roth. Yoel says, Eureka! At long last, I've been able to reverse engineer the list of accounts behind the Hamilton 68 dashboard. The Securing Democracy people have never been willing to release the list to anyone, but Yoel, pretty sharp fella, has cracked the code. He says, here's the full list, and he links it to a Google Docs spreadsheet. Here it is. Here's exactly what they say are the Russian bots. He says, TLDR, too long, didn't read. He writes, all right, well, the dashboard that they have, it includes 648 accounts as opposed to the 600 that they claim. He says the selection of accounts is ... bizarre and seemingly quite arbitrary. They appear to strongly preference pro-Trump accounts, which they use to assert that Russia is expressing a preference for Trump, even though there's not good evidence that any of the accounts they selected are or not actually Russian. Yoel says, let's discuss the strategy for how we want to use this information. I think it can help us refute a lot of the thinking in D.C. based around the dashboard. Okay, so all of the idiots in Washington, they're like, wow, Michael Chertoff's on this committee. What's the name of the committee? Is it like a real one? He says, yeah, it is. It's called Alliance for Securing Democracy. He says, whoa, do they have like a seal and a logo and everything? Yeah. They even have an address. Wow, holy moly. Well, who's on that committee? Michael Chertoff. Yeah, DHS. And who else? Well, John Podesta. Oh my gosh. And who else? The list goes on and on. And so all of the Washington idiots are taking this information and thinking it's real. It's not at all real. Twitter just reverse engineered it and they find out it's not even, they just picked up names that are pro-Trump accounts. That's it. Because the whole thing's a giant intelligence scam. These accounts, they concluded, are neither strongly Russian nor strongly bots. No evidence to support the statement that the dashboard is a finger on the pulse of Russian information ops. Not even true at all. Hardly illuminating a massive influence operation, they say. He goes back and he explains the remainder of these emails. 644 accounts were the total. What was the methodology for reverse engineering the accounts? He says, easy. I found their API key, which is a mysterious art I can't quite describe. And then I looked at which user IDs they were passing as parameters to the user timeline endpoint. That's it. So he could see literally, he just tapped into their data feed. Okay, so he can see exactly what they're looking at. And Yoel Roth is no fan of Donald Trump, right? He's not there trying to like get these guys. These accounts are neither Russian nor even problematic. Yoel says this, February 15th. Hi, everybody. He writes, we produced an extensive description of these accounts, but they are not Russian nor strongly bots. Hardly illuminating a massive influence operation. The sample set looks pretty small. It's the most shared domain. It's only being shared 138 times in 48 hours. All right. So these aren't even like big accounts. Only being shared 138 times in 48 hours. The most shared URL 38 times in 48 hours. Right. That is nothing. That's basically nothing. So this entire list of accounts, it's mostly legitimate right-wing Trump supporters. And they're not even, most of them are not even sharing big, not even giant accounts. It's just like a weird list of accounts. In layman terms, Hamilton 68, says Matt, barely had any Russians. All right. In fact, apart from a few RT accounts, it's mostly full of ordinary Americans with regular accounts, Canadians and British as well. It was a scam. Instead of tracking how, quote, Russia influenced American attitudes, Hamilton 68 simply collected a handful of mostly real, mostly American accounts and described their organic conversations as Russian scheming. Twitter immediately recognized these Hamilton-driven news stories. He said, this is a big problem for us, guys. This could implicate us. They said real people need to know that they've been unilaterally labeled Russian stooges without evidence or recourse. Yoel's weighing in on this. He sent this on January 23rd, 2018. 731, he writes, this is a big, messy strategic issue that Nick should weigh in on. He says, short version. Look, I reverse engineered a full list of these accounts that came over from Hamilton. We did a full analysis of them. And the Securing Democracy people's claims are totally bogus. Totally bogus. They don't know that we have the list, though, and they've refused to release it. I'm increasingly of the opinion that this dashboard is actively damaging and promotes polarization and distrust through its shoddy methodology. It's toxic from a partnership standpoint, but my recommendation at this stage is an ultimatum. Either you release the list or we will. It needs to be peer-reviewed. Real people need to know that they've been unilaterally labeled Russian stooges without evidence or recourse. It's a major problem. Hitting the panic button from within the walls of Twitter. Some Twitter execs badly wanted to out Hamilton. After Russians were blamed for hyping the hashtag Parkland shooting, one user wrote the following. February 15th. Says, why can't we just say that we've investigated these accounts and that these people genuinely have these viewpoints, and citing Hamilton 68 is wrong, irresponsible, and biased? Yoel responds, he says, well, the challenge is that they haven't released the account list, and we only have it because I reverse engineered it by looking at their API traffic. So any refutation would require us having to admit having obtained the account list, right? Says if we publish the list, if we out these guys, they're going to know that we hacked their data, basically. But he said, I still want a confrontation. My recommendation is an ultimatum. Release the list or we will. They said, all right, listen. We have to be careful about how much we push back on this entity, okay? Alliance for Securing Democracy. There's a lot of important people on there. Somebody sends an email regarding Hamilton 68 to somebody named Nick Pickles, copying Yoel, February 15, 2018. It says, from a comm standpoint, we're working extensively with reporters off the record and on background to explain the flaws in Hamilton 68 methodology without getting in our full knowledge of it, right? They're saying we're trying to sort of smooth this out. And we're trying to press them to encourage Hamilton 68 to be more transparent with their methodology. So it sounds like they're telling reporters, okay, look, if you're going to write a story about Russian bots and hacking America's elections and all this stuff, and your source is Hamilton 68, it's a bad source, so don't use them. Whether they do or not is up to them, of course. Encourage them, the journalists, to tell Hamilton 68 to be more open about their source. Carlos and others on the policy team have been pushing back similarly with congressional staff, telling Congress wants to believe it too. All of these people want to believe it, right? This is a think tank that has created a message that is extremely useful to all sorts of people in the media, all sorts of politicians. Everybody wants this big, big, bad boogeyman called the Russians to go after and censor all the rest of us in the months leading up and the years leading up to the 2020 election. Yoel or somebody says, until we have our own comparable but high quality analysis to point to publicly, we have to be careful in how much we push back on ASD publicly. Why? Because they are a protected group. This group has been set up to create this narrative. And so Twitter pushing back on them, they're going to get the backhand from guys like Adam Schiff. That came from somebody named Emily Horn, who was a future White House and NSC spokesperson. A lot of people have a lot of interest in making sure this carries on track. Another email came in. This is the future senior advisor to Pete Buttigieg writing. This is Carlos Monge. He sends the following to Nick and Yoel. He says, I'd +1 all the sentiment here. I also have been very frustrated about not calling out Hamilton more publicly, but I understand we have to play a longer game here. Right? They all know it's totally BS, totally nonsense. So Matt says the following. He writes, so look, The legitimate people, as one Twitter exec called them, never found out they'd been used as fodder for mountains of news stories about Russian influence. Because the Twitter files contain the list, they'd begun finding out. Matt Taibbi reached out to a number of these people. I'm shocked, says Sonia. Lived as a child through a civil war in Lebanon. She said, supposedly in a free world, we are being watched at many levels by what we say online. Yeah, it's true, Sonia. Sonia, is that a Russian name? I'm not sure. Matt says, I've written a book about the U.S. Constitution, says Chicago-based lawyer Dave Shestokas. Dave Shestokas Putin? How I made this list is incredible to me. Pfft, look at this guy. Typical Russian terrorist with a little Russian terrorist child on his head. Very convenient. Here, 24, Matt says, when I was growing up, my father told me about the McCarthyite blacklist, says Oregon native Jacob. As a child, it would never have occurred to me that this would come back in force and broadly in this way to undermine the rights we hold dear. Even Twitter executives were stunned to read who was on the list. Policy chief Nick Pickles wrote about British comic called Horborn, Old Horborn, a wind-up merchant. I follow him, and I wouldn't say he's pro-Russian. I can't even remember him tweeting about Russia. What the heck are you guys talking about over here? Nick Pickles says, yeah, this is a pretty weird list. I mean, one of them is a UK guy who is well known as basically a wind-up merchant. I follow him, and I wouldn't say he's pro-Russian. I don't even remember him tweeting about Russia. One is a parody Trump account. Another, a parody Putin account, which I think is based on them quote tweeting pro-Russian media. The oil had the same problem, and you couldn't distinguish them. I'd say the vast majority of these are useful idiots. The idea that accounts with 5, 8, and 12 followers, okay, not even any, they're like just throwaway accounts, man. Somebody create like an alt account. 5, 8, and 12 followers are somehow propaganda gurus. Seems odd too. We'll discuss transparency with them when we meet to see if they think that they should publish the list, right? Now, this isn't some weird organization of like weirdos that has like, tea around, a dinner table once every month or so. This is a think tank that all of the media for the whole country are plugging into, that all of congressional staff for the whole country are plugging into. And Twitter is saying their list is totally illegitimate. It's not even remotely real. It's not even connected to anything. Matt asks this person, Dennis Michael Lynch. He says, I'm listed as a foreign bot. He's a conservative media figure. As a proud tax-paying citizen, charitable family man, and honest son of a U.S. Marine, I deserve better. We all do, says Dennis. Looks like he's got a podcast. Go subscribe to Dennis Michael Lynch's podcast, @RealDennisLynch. Shout out to Dennis Lynch. Editor Joe Loria was also angered. You see, this fellow was labeled a Russian terrorist. Many people were. What makes this an important story is the sheer scale of the news footprint left by their digital McCarthyism that came out from Hamilton 68. The quantity of headlines and TV segments dwarfs the impact of individual fabulous like Jason Blair or Stephen Glass. You look at all these. All of these stories. All on a false premise that there was this big Russian account problem because guys like Chertoff and Podesta were saying so. And Bill Kristol, too. Look at all these stories. They had a story to sell. Hamilton 68 was used as a source to assert Russian influence in an astonishing array of news stories, including support for Brett Kavanaugh, even the Devin Nunes memo, the Parkland shooting, manipulation of black voters, attacks on the Mueller investigation. Every time there was a bad story, look. People came out and they were critical of Robert Mueller. What a stupid waste of time, a stupid investigation that was obviously without any merit at all. But people were speaking out against it. Guess what CNBC says? Russia is attempting to influence the investigation in an ongoing attack. Okay, the Democrats say it. They just pull it out anytime they have a problem. Russian. Oh, Russian disinformation. Nope, Russian disinformation. Did you wash your hands when you came out of that bathroom? I don't think you did. Russian disinformation. Right, everywhere you turn. Sick. Observers posted this one. Russian propagandists seize Kavanaugh controversy to sow division online. Is it really the Russians, or is it Americans were pretty sick about what the Democrats were doing to him? After Florida school shooting, a Russian bot army pounced, right? Because the Russians came in. And here is the Hamilton 68 dashboard. They say, early in the week, accounts promoted the Blexit movement, encouraging black voters to leave the Democratic Party. Blexit is Russian propaganda, because if you're a black American and you leave the Democratic Party, I mean, that would be insane, right? Why would you ever do that? That's crazy. Only reason would be probably Russian misinformation, Russian disinformation, probably the only reason. And it's a good thing Hamilton 68 out there is there to protect that possibility from happening. Pro-Kremlin accounts also sought to inflame the immigration debate by promoting that a second migrant caravan was heading towards the border. Is that Russian? I mean, there's like several million who've come over now. All right, you get the point of it, right? Whatever stories they don't like, it just turns into Russian disinformation. These stories raised fear in the population. The most insidious of all, they were used to smear people like Tulsi Gabbard, calling them assets, and they drum up sympathy for political causes like Joe Biden's campaign. Here, Russian web trolls boo Biden. They often boost Gabbard, report finds. The Russian web trolls, they boo Biden and they boost Gabbard. So that means if you like Tulsi Gabbard, you're in alignment with Russian web trolls. If you oppose Biden, you're about as equivalent as a Russian web troll. How could you possibly be so disgusting? Russia's propaganda machine discovers a 2020 Democratic candidate in Tulsi Gabbard, right? They're all compromised because they don't like them. Incredibly and ironically, Matt says, these stories were also frequently used as evidence of the spread of fake news. Trump supporters spread the majority of phony news on social media. And you got to do something about that if those Trump supporters are spreading disinfo. However, it was all a lie, says Matt. The illusion of Russian support was created by tracking people like Joe Loria, Sonia, Dave, the people we talked about. Virtually every major American news organization cited these fake tales. Even fact-checking sites like Snopes and PolitiFact said the following. Russia's social media efforts in 2016 were not just false, but inflammatory. Here's another one from Snopes. Trolls, bots, useful idiots attack new committee aimed at exposing Russia propaganda campaigns. All of it was fake. Twitter acknowledged it. But Twitter didn't have the guts to out Hamilton 68 publicly. But they did try to speak to reporters off the records. Here's what one email says, February 16th. Somebody said the following at 1:20. They wrote, all right, I discussed a bit of this today with Carlos. Would love for us to sync early next week about what we can do about Hamilton. Given both the internal and external pressure we're under, I think we need to huddle on the best way forward. Reporters are chafing at our off-the-record cautions on methodology, and the Florida stuff this week really drives home to me that Hamilton 68 is going to keep being fast, sloppy, and their damage won't just be restricted to Russia stuff. Nick, I know this is more your lane. I'm happy to schedule something, but I defer to you. Yes, please. I'll be in Colorado. Schedule any time. What time for Lauren? Perfect. Anyone else from legal should join? For now, I think it's just best that the two of us meet. So Twitter knows, but they can't do anything about it. Reaching out to individual reporters who are covering this to try to shape, but at this point, it's shouting into the void, right? So even Twitter can't put the genie back in the bottle. Everybody has what they want. They have this giant boogeyman that they can use at any turn. Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? Poof, what do you need? Oh, Russia. Perfect. Everything can be Russia. And even when Twitter tries to tell the journalists, stop relying on Hamilton 68, the journalists just say, yeah, but Michael Chertoff. Yeah, but Bill Kristol's over there too. And John Podesta. Roth was offended by the idea that tweets on certain themes suggested subversion. He said, can we talk about how incredibly condescending this is? Here. Somebody writes over to Yoel. To Yoel's comment, they says, I don't think that they can claim all the accounts are clearly Russian or bots. Some of the accounts are clearly Russian, like RT and Sputnik. He says, can we all pause for a moment and acknowledge how incredibly condescending the third bullet point is? If you talk about these themes, you must have been duped by Russian propaganda. Right, that's exactly right. Accounts run by people around the world who amplify pro-Russian themes after being influenced. Yeah, it's really condescending. This is saying that if you sort of agree with something that might be in alignment with Russia, then you're amplifying pro-Russian themes. Even Yoel is saying this is really insane, which is amazing that he would say that too. Again, even Roth, like most Twitter execs, is an ardent Democratic partisan. He saw that this scheme would lead people to assert that any right-leaning content is propagated by Russian bots, which is the whole point of this entire operation. He writes, semi-related, the Hamilton dashboard is once again getting a lot of traction around partisan trends, which is leading people to assert that any right-leaning content is propagated by Russian bots, because Hamilton said so. Nick, I think it may make sense for us to revisit the idea of more actively refuting the dashboard. It's a collection of right-leaning legitimate users that are being used to paint a polarizing and inaccurate picture of a conversation on Twitter. Yoel. January 19th. At least 2 other researchers and institutions that use similar methodologies were also being cited in news stories. They were also criticized by Twitter in a similar way. MSNBC, Watts, WAPO, Politico, Mother Jones, they did at least 14 Hamilton 68 stories, and the Alliance for Securing Democracy and others, including Dianne Feinstein and others, all refused to comment unless this counts, Matt says. Matt Taibbi tweeted this. He says, a question for all of you people here at the Alliance for Securing Democracy. Are you really going to go no comment on my upcoming story about you guys? I have the list. It's time to come clean. They said, oh, well, you can describe our methodology right here. And so they linked to that. We'll see if we click over there. This was an academic scandal as well. Harvard, Princeton, Temple, NYU, GWU, and other universities promoted Hamilton 68 as a source. Once you have a nice little thing that you can latch onto, they'll do it. Profile of a Russian troll factory. This was published in some journal somewhere. Here's another link, right? All of these universities are linking. Princeton, Shapiro, tracking and reacting to Russian attacks on democracy. And they're all linking back to Hamilton 68. Problem is, it's not true. Perhaps most embarrassingly, elected officials promoted the site, and they invited Hamilton experts to testify. Dianne Feinstein, James Lankford, Richard Blumenthal, Adam Pencilneck Schiff, and Mark Warner were among the offenders. Feinstein put this press release out. All of these people are going to come out and speak, and they're going to talk about Russian bots and trolls surrounding the Release the Memo campaign. They didn't want that memo to come out, so the Russians were behind it. Very convenient. Former FBI agent says follow the dead bodies on the Russian probe. Clint Watts said he fears after speaking with the Intelligence Committee. All fake. The mix, says Matt, of digital McCarthyism and fraud did great damage to American politics and culture. News outlets that don't disavow these stories or that still pay Hamilton vets as analysts shouldn't be trusted. Every subscriber to those outlets should write letters about this issue. For more on the Twitter files, follow all of these journalists. You know them, Barry Weiss, Fang, Schellenberger, and others. Twitter had no input into this story. For more, read more to racket.news. And special thanks to Orr for putting together the video on the top of this thread. One more time, he says, news outlets that don't disavow these stories or that still pay Hamilton vets as analysts shouldn't be trusted. Every subscriber to those outlets should write about the issue. Yeah, and so all of those people you saw at the top of the thread, right? All of these people, the Bill Kristols, the John Podestas, all of the people on these boards, Tumas, David Kramer. This is the analog of the Hunter Biden laptop letter. Remember when the 50 so-called intelligence experts came out and they told us all that, oh, no, that's Russian disinformation. Yeah. This is the same thing, except they just formed a whole committee, right? A whole organization called the Alliance for Saving Democracy that apparently was created to wreck democracy by labeling everyday Americans as Russian bots and then using that fake label to create fake stories that they could spread around Congress and spread around the media in order to win elections. Pretty horrific. Now, we'll see what they said because they did issue that response. Here is a response from Hamilton 68. We're going to go through their response as well as take a look at the addendum from Matt Taibbi, because Matt Taibbi posted an addendum to this as well. So we've got a little bit more work to do. But first, let's talk about our friends over at Goldco, because, you know, my friends, things are scary out there. If you've got an IRA or a 401k or a savings account, you know that it is kind of nuts. Biden administration has already printed more money in the past 2 years than the previous 100 years combined. The national debt has hit a record $30+ trillion. Inflation's the highest we've seen since 1982. It's only a matter of time before the house of cards comes crashing down. If you have retirement savings, your money could be at serious risk. Talk to my friends at Goldco to see how you can protect your retirement with gold and silver before it's too late. It's very easy. You can go to robertlikesgold.com. They'll give you $10,000 or more in free silver when you open up a qualifying account at robertlikesgold.com. They are an A+ rated business with a Better Business Bureau, and they're good friends of the program. And you know as well as I do, my friends, I do like gold. So definitely check out Robert Likes Gold and our friends over at Goldco. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. Hamilton 68 now responds. Let's see what they say in reaction to Twitter Files 15. Hamilton is located here, Hamilton 68, the fact sheet for the Alliance for Securing Democracy. Here is their big, long litany of explanation. Let's take a look at what they say. They say that we analyzed a dynamic list of more than 600 Twitter accounts. When was this published? January 27, 2023. Recent reporting on Hamilton disregards the dashboard's published methodology. The original methodology acknowledged that the content within the network is complex and should be understood in a nuanced way, which means it's a baloney. Members of the media, pundits, and even some lawmakers often fail to include appropriate context when using the dashboard's data, and so that they are now trying to correct misconceptions. All right, so they have a whole list of explanations here. The Hamilton 68 Project deceived reporters. Claim, no. It says we engaged with reporters. Of course you did. We'll take conversations in conservative circles and accuse them of being Russian. They say no. That claim is not supported by the data. Almost every day the dashboard was operational. The most used hashtags were focused on these things. All right. So you see, they're explaining the data as best as they can. I think that it's probably all garbage because Twitter has said it's garbage, and they can actually see the data, not the API data. They can see the real data. So Hamilton responds, and then Matt Taibbi responds to Hamilton. Here's what Matt says, January 28th. He writes, Hamilton responded to the Twitter Files thread with a series of claims, including that their site was always intended to be understood as nuanced, that they always maintained witting or unwitting accounts could be on their list, and that, quote, some accounts we tracked are automated bots, some are trolls, and some are real users. They could have also inserted the disclaimer added to the new Hamilton 2.0 page, the new one, which, as a helpful reader noted this morning, includes in red font a blaring warning to all that it would be incorrect to label anyone or anything that appears on their dashboard as being connected to state-backed propaganda. Here's the new warning from Hamilton 68. How to interpret Hamilton 2.0. Hamilton 2.0 displays outputs, blah, blah, blah. It would therefore be incorrect to, without further analysis, label anyone or anything that appears on the dashboard as being connected to state-backed propaganda. That's a big disclaimer on that one, huh? Yeah, wonder where what that was all about. Thank heaven for the Wayback Machine. Here's what they wrote originally when they created their list. The Wayback Machine says, these accounts were selected for their relationship to Russian-sponsored influence and disinformation campaigns, and not because of any domestic political content. We have monitored these data sets for months in order to verify their relevance to Russian disinformation programs targeting the U.S. This will provide a resource for journalists to appropriately identify Russian-sponsored information campaigns. Wow, that's a little bit different than what they just posted here, isn't it? It's a little bit different. First one's like, our data is great. You can trust it. It's very reliable. If we say they're Russian terrorists, they're Russian, okay? Now they're like, oh, it's just for informational purposes. It's just kind of like a phone book that you found from 1984. High on that original page, the Hamilton founders explained they monitored 2 types of accounts. First section was overt promotion of content. This was for media outlets known to be controlled by the Russian government. The second was content tweeted by bots and trolls. So the Hamilton list, writes Matt, they tracked overt Russian media on the one hand, bots and trolls on the other. But note the difference between that language and the language on Friday. Some accounts we track are automated bots, some are trolls, and some are real users. That Hamilton on Friday was trying to distance itself from its headline is grotesque, even after it was identifying the composition that way from the start. He says, I encourage everyone to read the language. Lastly, I want to point out something that I overlooked. He says, individual accounts were algorithmically selected based on analytic techniques developed by somebody named J.M. Berger to identify the most influential accounts within those networks. The Hamilton 68 team did not individually review or verify all the accounts. Translating, individual accounts were chosen because of a user called Berger, a writer, think tanker whose usual specialty is extremism. So in other words, nobody even looked at the list. Wow. Yeah. So all of it was aggregated, right? And everybody probably wanted plausible deniability. The list was the fruit of more than 3 years of observation of monitoring that nobody even ever looked at. Sound solid? Yes or no? That's Matt Taibbi. That's Twitter Files 15. And so you can see what happened here. We have this roundabout of just round and around we go of these think tanks. We have these organizations that will sort of create themselves. I mean, we saw the same thing with Fusion GPS and Christopher Steele and the Steele dossier. Michael Sussman came up with the story, tried to sell the story to the FBI. Then he went to the media, said the FBI is working on this story. And the FBI, he told the FBI, the media is working on this story. And both sides were playing off one another. Same thing happened here. They just created a think tank that gave them carte blanche to go and take whatever they wanted off the playing board. Everything is Russian disinformation. It's censorship to the highest degree. The media was complicit in it. Big tech knew it was going on and they allowed it to go on. And you can imagine it can't just be this one entity, right? There's got to be gobs of other entities that are doing very similar things. This is the one that got caught because Elon happened to buy the company. What else is like this that exists out there in this ecosystem of politics? We will continue to investigate and uncover. Hopefully you join us. Thank you for liking this video wherever you're watching this. We are covering all of the Twitter files, and so we'll continue to do so. We look forward to having you join us as we continue our journey. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for hitting the like button wherever it is you are watching it. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.